Zooming? This next segment in the symposium on the road to human space settlement is a report on the NSS challenge, which in your program book I think is described fairly accurately as commercially viable space settlements, real possibility, wishful thinking, or self-delusion. The NSS challenge to would-be privatizers. Many of those who advocate space settlement have argued that one, space settlement will happen when and only when it becomes commercially feasible, or when someone can make a buck from it. And secondly, that nonetheless, sooner or later, space settlement will indeed happen. In some circles, these beliefs have taken on a religious mantra. It won't happen until somebody can pay for it, and it won't happen. It will happen anyway, just because it will happen. The question then is, are those beliefs correct? Is an economically self-sufficient space settlement feasible on the Moon or Mars or other bodies in the solar system? We've all assumed it, we haven't examined it. Before we can formulate a real space policy and then allocate our resources and our efforts to governmental or non-governmental programs, we must really know what our options are and what we're trying to build for. National Space Society recognizes, and always has, that the directions and timetables of human space settlement may very well depend on when such a settlement can become commercially profitable, or at least can become economically self-sufficient. To date, however, as I said, we have only assumed that sooner or later such favorable economics will exist, and no one has set forth any scenario that would rigorously confirm such an assumption. You could lay on the table and people would say, I see how it works, I see your business plan. If these assumptions hold true, these numbers hold true, then it will work. And therefore, let's go ahead and build to it. We know that the government can get people onto other worlds, as we saw with Apollo, however unfortunately limited that effort became. We do not know that private enterprise can ever get us beyond Earth orbit onto other worlds, in a civilization with thriving communities there. If a space settlement on another world is going to pay for itself, the bottom line is sooner or later it's going to have to generate products that people can use and will pay for. These may be tangible products, these should be art, these should be ideas, but something that they can pay for. Even people who might purchase land or infrastructure in other worlds on speculation will ultimately need to find end users who can actually use the land. To date, no such end-use products appear to have been identified that would support a space settlement without continuing subsidies. Likewise, it has not been demonstrated that contemplated commercial uses of space can generate launchers that are both powerful and cheap enough that they also could be used to support economical space settlements beyond the Earth. Now, some of you have heard Buzz Aldrin addressing that problem, trying to harness the commercial market in a way that would at least generate the launch infrastructure for human settlement. But so far, that's not happening, and the space community has not yet analyzed Buzz's numbers or even gotten behind it, so the question still remains open. Accordingly, last year, the National Space Society gave the space community the opportunity to see whether all the grand talk of privatization was anything more than talk. Last year, we issued this significant challenge to private enterprise. We had a special call for papers for this conference, which challenged those in the academic, university, business communities to answer this question. Is an economically self-sufficient space settlement on the Moon or Mars or other bodies in the solar system feasible? No one met the challenge this year. We did not receive any papers that would answer that question, and so essentially we're at the same place we were there. No one has come forth to show that our dream of self-supporting space settlement is possible. And we need to know this, one way or another. Are our dreams realistic, or are we just talking science fiction when we gather here? Let me exactly what the challenge was and what the paper is. We asked for a paper that could describe a space settlement that is either A, a closed system that after startup is physically self-sufficient and thus able to function indefinitely without imports, which would have to be paid for. Figure a closed environment. Think of a lunar colony that's cut off from the Earth. They'd be able to survive because they're self-sufficient. The second option we gave to meet the challenge was what we call an open system. A system that would require the import of resources and the means to generate income to pay for those resources. So in other words, if you're going to have to buy drugs from Earth, how are you going to pay for them? Ideally, in that kind of scenario, the space settlement would generate enough revenue to pay off all the startup costs, including launch vehicles, transportation costs, settlement materials. But we would accept a paper which writes off all those costs and then just ask for a settlement that is marginally profitable once the startup date is hit. For example, if one of you could talk to your Uncle Bill Gates and ask him to donate $1 billion to set up a working lunar settlement, Martian colony, and then Bill took his money and walked away, would that Martian colony and moon settlement be able to pay for itself without requiring continuing subsidies? Now, you have heard over and over again, you've seen on the net, you've listened to arguments of other organizations, that all this is possible. Because we stand here today, we really don't know exactly how. It's just assumed. So, our challenge is open, and if we were to receive papers for next year, we will be featuring our challenge to show the space community that something is possible. The challenge will be posted on our website with this kind of word, with the proper instructions for how to do it. But we've got to answer the question, can I do it? I don't think we can underestimate the implications of the challenge that we posed last year. If we believe that space settlement is important for its own sake, it's important to society, and it's important to civilization, then we've got to find a way to accomplish it. And that means if the commercial interests cannot provide a realistic scenario with quantified financial projections, then by default, one has to look to government. And governments theoretically do exist to provide for citizens what citizens cannot afford to do, or cannot do individually, or can only do it efficiently by themselves. And unfortunately, as you know, a lot of people, government involvement is the lesser of two alternatives. Or some people's just philosophical rejection of all forms. So therefore, the challenge is out there. Either show how we can do it commercially, or help us find a way, as we start with 1% in the future, to develop a government program that will give us a space program to go somewhere. Launchers that put little tin cans circling around our heads, satellites that launch this television are fine. They do not get us to having thriving communities beyond Earth orbit. Our bottom line in this organization, your bottom line in coming to this conference, your bottom line in supporting space, we want a space program that goes somewhere. We cannot live with a quasi-religious belief in the inevitability of a non-governmental, self-supporting space settlement. Given the economics as we know them today, we just have no basis to conclude that a human space settlement is going to happen by itself. So we can only hope that our space advocates, hopefully by next year, will produce a realistic settlement scenario that we then all can get behind and rally the whole space community behind and say, yes, we now know it's a wonderful thing, this should be our goal, this is how we should do it, let's start putting these steps in place. I'd like to see you all go out to your communities, spread the word among these people who are saying these things, and let's put it down on paper, let's just go into the world, give you a forum if you can. And if you don't want to do it, we have a community space